Hello, my name is Greg Hintermeister, and I work in the Cloud Engagement Hub at IBM. So recently I've shown several demonstrations of this journey to a distributed cloud. And for today's demonstration, I'm going to take IBM Cloud Satellite and show you how we can automate the provisioning of the entire location on AWS, including provisioning the required infrastructure to run the location and run a OpenShift cluster that will also deploy. So let's take a look. So in this environment, I've got a number of locations. And again, they span on-prem, private, and I've already got an existing AWS location. Now I've manually provisioned this before. And you see I've got hosts that are assigned and unassigned. And if you flip over to the AWS environment, you'll see the hosts right there. They're the EC2 instances that I set up and ran a script to attach back into that cluster or into the Cloud Satellite location. But what I want to do now is show you how to automate that entire experience. And so we're setting up AWS so we can take a look at it. And now we're going to create a location. And so first I'm going to click this Amazon Web Services and then add the credentials. Now as a point, I've edited this for time, so some things will go faster than it actually does. When I add the credentials, Cloud Satellite will then let me choose the region and the instance type and how many hosts I want in that location to start with. And so I'm going to give it a name of the satellite location. Choose where I'm managing from, in this case, Washington, D.C., the IBM Cloud data center, the IBM Cloud region. And then I'm going to click Create. Now, it's really that simple. Over time, as we go through this, you're going to see how the hosts start getting added to this location from my AWS account. Okay, so now we are looking at the account and it's already starting to create the VPC that we'll use. And I'm going to refresh my instances list. And by George, here they are, the 9 hosts that we'll be using in that location. And so I've filtered down. I'm going to see all 9 hosts. And some of them are going to be used for the control plane, and some will be used for the cloud services. In this case, I'll use OpenShift, but I could deploy other services as well. So while that's working, now let's take a look at some of the details of the kind of infrastructure that Cloud Satellite is using. And it's using the schematics. It's built on Terraform, and so it's using the Terraform interfaces into AWS. And it created the VPC, obviously, but it also created a subnet, or a series of subnets. So if I'm going to use the VPC name as a filter, and you'll see it's created 3 subnets for me. And if I scroll down, I'm going to click on the network ACLs, and it's going to show me that I've created one of those. And now we're going to look at the security groups for this particular VPC. And I've got the inbound rules and outbound rules for that. Okay, so now that I'm back in Cloud Satellite, you'll see that the hosts are going to start to come in. And now that they are all ready, I can start assigning them. And so you'll see that Cloud Satellite has pre-provisioned 9 hosts across 3 availability zones. And so when I chose the region for AWS, Cloud Satellite said, great, we want a highly available environment across 3 zones. And so now it's my job to assign hosts to the control plane. And I want 1 host per availability zone within that control plane. And so, of course, if you want more, then you'd pick 3 more hosts, 1 in each availability zone. and go from there. So here I have US East 1B, and then I'll pick 1C for the third host for the satellite control plane. And as we showed earlier, this then is the local control plane in AWS that controls all of the clusters that I'll be provisioning in the future, and it is the control plane that calls home to the centralized cloud satellite control plane. Okay, so now that the control plane is set up, we're actually going to create an OpenShift cluster in that remote satellite location. So I'm going to choose 4.6 OpenShift, choose Cloud Satellite, and then you'll see that I'm choosing the AWS location as well. And because I've preset it up to have across 3 availability zones, it's going to automatically choose hosts that match within those zones. And so I've chosen 4x16 hosts, and it'll choose them. And so I've clicked create. It's going to be doing some thinking. Once I click the worker nodes, it will show me the 3 hosts it chose. Now it's got some some funny names. So if I go back to the satellite location, okay, here it shows me the 3 worker nodes that it chose for that OpenShift cluster. So it is deploying, and through the magic of video, it is now ready to run. But look at this. The UI for the cluster is not showing up. Aha. Well, that's by design. Cloud Satellite assumes you are going to live in a private environment. And so if you look, it's using the private IP addresses, so you can only access this cluster, well, in one of 2 ways. You can either VPN into the VPC on Amazon, or do what I'm doing, is I'm going to reconfigure IBM Cloud to use the public IP addresses that are available on those nodes. And so in this CLI, I've cut it down for time, but you'll see I'm doing some commands. I'll put the link of the documentation to do that, and I'm just changing which IP address to use from the private IPs into the public IPs. Okay, so now I've listed them, and I'm now using the public IPs that are in the AWS cluster, as you can see in my little circle there. And the final thing I'm going to do, though, is then change the control plane IP addresses as well. And so I've done that, and now I'm going to I'm going to actually connect first to the CLI to connect to that OpenShift cluster. And sure enough, you see that I'm using, I did my get nodes, and I have the proper nodes available. And if you look at the projects using the OC command, you'll see all the projects in this cluster. And now let's go to the UI itself to open it up. And now, because I can get to it without VPN, but still using the IBM ID logon, I can see the same projects as I did in the CLI. And then if I scroll up to compute and look at the nodes, you'll see those same cluster worker nodes in the cluster. And so that's it. So now, since I'm using my IBM Cloud ID, that controls access to that cluster, and I'm ready to go. Okay, so that's just a brief summary of how I can take IBM Cloud Satellite and automate the provisioning of the entire location, including the infrastructure that the location needs, pre-provision a number of VMs to use as worker nodes for clusters, and then deploy a cluster and have it grab any of the worker nodes that match. So thank you. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.